yeah, if you're interested in diving, dive somewhere near you. Like look up local shops. You can find one. I can assure you, you can find one near you.
Off Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. I first met Thomas while working at Dive World Austin in Central Texas. It was apparent that he had been bitten by the scuba bug, so naturally, we became fast friends. Since starting this podcast, he has been one of my biggest supporters, and I feel privileged to share his story. In this episode, we speak about Circle H Scuba, finding your local diving, advertising improvements, the joy of teaching, and much more. I hope you enjoy. Thomas, how are you doing this evening? Or I should say this morning. Sorry, it's evening for me, morning for you.
I was gonna say it's this morning for me. Yeah. It's 7 in the morning over here. I think we're exactly 12 hours apart, which works out pretty well. So luckily, I'm a morning person. I know most people are evening people, so this works great for me. You know, it's Monday morning over here, getting ready for the workday, and get to chat with you before I go into my day job.
Awesome. Well, we'll get to the day job. Well, actually, what do you do for a day job?
It's a little complicated. I work for Autodesk, which if you've ever heard of like AutoCAD, or if you're into 3D modeling and you've heard of Maya or 3ds Max or something like that, they make that product. Software engineer there that basically works on internal software that lets our developers build things. So for any of the developers out there, I run GitHub and a lot of automations around GitHub. So like all of our source code goes into there and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it's, you know, it gets the job done and it pays the bills, allows me to go diving. So
Speaking of diving, the first question I always like to ask, man, is tell me how you got into diving, why you got into diving, and then talk about that first experience, that first breath underwater. Was it love at first breath, or was it something you kind of had to overcome? It's usually different for everybody, so I love to hear the stories.
yeah, absolutely. So I got certified, I think it was October 2020. So in 2020, we had that wonderful thing going around that kind of kept everyone at home and looking for new things. And I actually broke up with someone I was in a little bit of a longer term relationship and broke up with someone February 2020. So I got out of that and I said, oh man, I'm going to get back out there. I'm going to join a bunch of clubs. I'm going to find all these new hobbies to do and like meet people locally instead of the dating apps and all that junk. And of course, like 2 weeks later, lockdown starts and I'm like, oh man, this ruins everything. And as time goes on for that year, and we all saw that this wasn't just like a short thing anymore, I was like, man, I really got to get out of the house. Like I work from home. I'm not getting out seeing anybody. I'm not interacting. Like, what can I do? And all the like meetup groups had stopped. All the, you know, local, whatever sports and stuff like that were stopped and everything too. And I saw an ad for Dive World Austin saying, hey, you know, do you want to get scuba certified today? And I was like, man, you know, I've always thought about getting scuba certified, and I used to watch those YouTube videos from Man Plus River, where he's like finding phones and watches in the river and stuff. And I was like, that'd be kind of cool. I kind of want to do something like that. So yeah, I went over to the shop and just asked a few questions and signed up and did my open water with John Redman, an instructor over there. And he told us awesome stories about how he was on St. Thomas for like a couple years and instructed out there and like living out on the beach. And I kind of fell in love with the mindset of that. And we went into the pool for that first session, took that breath underwater. And I remember specifically realizing like, I've been down here for a minute or two and I haven't had to go up for air. Like, that's kind of weird. And, you know, normally when you're in a pool, you dive down to the bottom, you pick up a dive ring or something, and you get to come back up. And this was my first time like, wow, I'm actually sitting down here and just breathing. This is really cool. And he had one of those little like torpedo toys he's throwing across like a football and stuff. I'm like, man, this is so awesome. And I mean, absolutely hooked at that point. I finished open water. I went in and bought like a complete set of gear at that point. Like a lot of shops have like the BCD rig set, and you know, sometimes you can buy a computer with it too or something. So I bought like a complete set of gear. I still use it now. It's my pool setup when I'm teaching now. I mean, yeah, it was like day one, instant hooked, and I've been, you know, diving like crazy since.
Oh, that's awesome. No, that's awesome that there was no, because I know for some people there's that little bit of nervousness going into it, but for other people such as yourself, yeah, when it's like that first breath, you're like, how come it took me this long to do this? Like, why didn't
Yeah.
I do this before? No, yeah, I was instantly hooked the first moment I went underwater. So that's an amazing story, especially, coming off of COVID, trying to find something to do, and then you got introduced to the diving world, especially in Austin, because I know before I knew of diving, you don't really think of Austin, Texas as a place to dive. So when
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
whole community opens up to you, you're like, man, where has this been? Like the whole time I've been living here.
Yeah, I was just going to say about that. Like, I almost feel like it's one of the great injustices in our industry is that the marketing is kind of terrible. Like, unless you know someone that's a diver, you don't necessarily think actively, let me seek out a dive center near me. And, there's diving all across the country, inland, no matter where you are, there's going to be a dive shop somewhere and they'll find a lake or a river or a quarry to go to, even if it's an hour or two away. Yeah, like you said, I mean, you don't know that diving is even there or it's even an option for you. And, unless you have the opportunity to go on a trip maybe, and that's how some people get introduced, right? They take a cruise and they're like, oh yeah, I did a Discover Scuba diving on a cruise and now I want to get certified. But like, other than that, how do people find out about diving? We advertise in print magazines that are marketed to divers, and we advertise through dive shops, which are marketed to divers. And it kind of feels like the industry is a little behind on that, where there's not as much push to the non-diver, like new acquisition type piece. So yeah, I don't know how people find out about diving unless they know a diver already.
Yeah, well, the odd thing is it same scenario for me. The first time I went diving, I was on a backpacking trip in Thailand, and I came back to Austin, and I literally in my head I was just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to wait to go back out on a trip to get certified, because I knew as soon as I went in, I just did a Discover Scuba dive. I was like, I'm 100% gonna get certified, but I had no clue. And randomly, I was having some drinks after work at one of the local bars by where I was working in Austin. And I was just chatting with this complete stranger, telling him like, "Oh man, I went scuba diving. It was so awesome." And he was like, there's some dive shops in Austin, right?" And I was like, "What?" And then as soon as I found out, that just kind of led me down this path that still I'm on and probably will not stop. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's diving everywhere. I have a friend in Vegas, and he's like, "Oh yeah, there's a dive shop here, and they drive like an hour and a half for their open water dives." And I was like, "Man, that's a good drive." But like, that's cool that they're able to support that though, and build a community around there still. So, yeah, if you're interested in diving, dive somewhere near you. Like, look up local shops. You can find one. I can assure you, you can find one near you.
yeah, no, definitely, because there is it is surprising. And even when I kind of started, like this whole world started opening up, to find out, like, man, there's actually quite a bit of diving in Texas. Not even just Austin, but just in Texas in general. And then you start seeing all these other inland areas, freshwater lakes, quarries, kind of like you're saying. And it's crazy how big but small, I guess, I don't know if that makes sense, of a world that this is, because once you start getting into it, you're like, oh, there's diving there. No, we definitely got to get the word out. So all you listeners, tell a friend.
It's I saw a statistic. It was like less than 0.1% of the world population is certified as divers. And, I mean, if you add in that like 70% of the earth is covered in ocean and stuff, right? Like, or covered in water, it's like, man, there's a lot of the world out there that people aren't even experiencing or even like have the option to experience because there's so few people certified. And, I mean, it's not a dying industry by any means, of course. Like, numbers are going up for new certifications, but yeah, it's a little crazy to me. I just can't believe, like, I don't know how I would have found diving if it wasn't for me coming across some YouTube videos and being like stuck with no other option during the lockdown period there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I would have got into it. So
Well, thank God that you did. And now you're here chatting with me.
yeah, it changed my life. I mean, it really has. Diving's done a lot for me. I mean, I think we'll probably talk about it, but I've gone on now and I've become an instructor with Patty. It's done a lot for like my mental health as well, like the amount of stress relief that I get when I go on a dive, and even if I'm teaching too, like teaching can be stressful in its own way, but I love like sharing a passion of mine with other people. So yeah, like from a stress relief, just like relaxation period, I have a hard time kind of turning off. And underwater, you can't have your phone with you really. You can't, check emails, and you can't check social media and stuff like that. So just having that, 45 minutes to an hour underwater by myself with a, group of people, of course, but like,
Yeah.
no distractions really at all. I mean, it's been great. I love doing it.
No, that's awesome. And speaking of that, I wanted to ask, do you want to talk a little bit about your progression through the ranks up to an instructor? And then I would like to maybe go a little bit more into the mental health side of it. I do believe it does help people's mental health quite a bit. So, but yeah, talk about the progression like that. Was it as soon as you were done with the class, was it like walking up to the desk being like, sign me up for the next one? Did you know you were planning to be an instructor, or is it just something that kind of happened? Yeah, just tell me about the progression.
No, great question. So, yeah, so I had such a great experience with, I can't say enough about John Redman as an open water instructor. If you're in the Austin area and you happen to want to get certified through Dive World, John Redman's great. A lot of their instructors that I've met and hung out with and stuff, they're all great. But John Redman did a really good job of like selling the lifestyle, I feel like, in a way. Not that he was trying to or he had too much, but when he was telling me about like his time on St. Thomas and everything, I was like, man, I would love to do that someday, and maybe I can like early retire somehow and like save up enough money to go move to an island and take a few years at the very least, if not like make that my life. So that might still be in the cards in the future. We'll see. But I'm trying to do it in a really smart way where I don't have to give up too much, which maybe isn't the smartest way. We'll see. But when I first finished class, like I said, I bought all my gear. I mean, I was all in. But then the problem comes of like, okay, I finished class, but now what? And I think this is a problem that a lot of divers face. And most dive shops, if they're doing it right, they have some type of community group, like a Facebook group or a meetup group. There's dive clubs in the areas and things like that. And they'll tell you about that. And they'll say like, hey, yeah, go on a few dives with some dive buddies. And for me, my open water class had like 3 high school girls in it and a guy that lived like 2 hours away that drove in to get certified. So I wasn't going to be diving with any of them. For reference, I'm 32, and in 2020, what is it, 2029, I guess, if I'm doing my math right. So, I was 29 years old. I'm not going to be diving with, 15, 16-year-old high school girls or, a guy that lives a few hours away. So, and what I didn't know at the time is that most local dive sites have divers there pretty much every weekend. And if you just show up with gear, you can talk to random people and be like, hey, I would love to go diving and get some experience. I'm new. I'm looking for a dive buddy. Do you mind if I join? And most people are pretty open to that and pretty cool with it. I didn't know that. And being 2020 timeframe, somewhat introverted up to a point, I work from home. I'm not interacting with people. It can be a little nerve-wracking sometimes for people too to do that. So I did ask the shop. I said, what should I do next? And they said, oh, well, you can take your advanced class and advance your skills. And and I was explained it's not so much that you're an advanced diver. You're advancing your skills and learning more about diving. And I was like, that's cool. I'll do that. And AOW, or Advanced Open Water with Patty, I almost quit diving, actually. So
Really?
funny enough. Yeah. So all this great talk about diving and how much I love it. But yeah, so what happened was I, for some reason, did not put 2 and 2 together that as it gets colder, of course, the water's also going to be colder. And I think it was like November now in Lake Travis there in Austin. And I had bought a 5 mil wetsuit. And that was my first time ever wearing a wetsuit. And it didn't fit perfectly. Like, it was definitely too long, because if you've ever tried on a wetsuit, they never fit you perfect. You always have to do something to it, or you just deal with like folding it over in different spots. And I'm a little bit of a bigger guy, so it's like I had to get a bigger size, but they think if you're bigger in size, that also means you're taller. And they don't always think about people that are rounder. So I had like way too long legs that were like folded and doubled over from like the knee all the way down almost. Like my arms were like way too long, super uncomfortable. And I was so like task loaded with feeling uncomfortable and feeling like very restricted. Like I could feel my like heartbeat through my limbs because I was so tight from folding things over, that we did a couple dives. And I think we did like the out and back navigation, like the first part of underwater nav for AOW. And literally, like, I just kept surfacing. Like, I could not stay under. I was trying to swim the straight line, and I'd be swimming, and I think I was holding my compass up, so I just was like going straight up. And I would surface every time. And I was telling the instructor, like, I like don't know what's going on. I'm so pissed off right now. Like, what is happening? Like, I'm so frustrated. And they're like, no, you're fine. Like, calm down. And I totally just got in my head, and I'm sure you've seen it as well as an instructor, but sometimes you get in your head and like, there's nothing you can do to convince that person that like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, chill out, So I was like, I'm done. Like, this is stupid. If this is what I have to deal with, like, I can't do this. I'm done. And I remember I went back to the shop and I totally raised a fuss, and I feel bad, but I totally raised a stink about how like this wetsuit like doesn't even fit right, and like I've never bought a wetsuit, so I relied on you guys to tell me what to wear, and like I was sold this suit that like doesn't even fit me, and all this different crap. And man, they took care of me so much. Like, I cannot say enough about Dive World Austin, and probably most dive shops, but especially with them. I mean, they treated me like family, and they're like, hey, like, we're gonna make it right. We'll send your wetsuit off to Henderson. We're gonna have them hem it up some and like adjust it some for you. It'll be totally fine. Why don't you go on like a dive trip with us? Get some fun dives in the ocean where like you can see what diving's really about. It's not just freshwater cold lakes, and see how it goes, right? And I was like, okay, let me do that instead. So I ended up going to St. Lucia the following year in the springtime, and like had an amazing time. The first few dives, I'm all over the place with my buoyancy, and by the end of the week, I was a completely different diver. Obviously not locked in perfect or anything like that, but I mean, so much more comfortable in the water, so much better. I was like able to take off a bunch of lead. I didn't have to wear as much weight anymore and all this different stuff, and it felt so good. And I came back from that trip and I did PPB, peak performance buoyancy, because I was so worried about the fact that I kept surfacing on my out and back. And when I did that, it was the same instructor that was my AOW, and they were saying to me, they're like, "You are a completely different person. Like, you are so more relaxed. Like, you should have just got more dives in before you took your AOW." So, yeah. So, long story short, I guess, like, I didn't quit. I went back into it. I just took a few months off basically over the winter, and then went on a trip to enjoy myself, came back, did that, finished my AOW, did some more trips, got a lot more time in the water and everything like that, did some other specialties and fun things like that. And, just kind of basically fell in love with that. Like, go on trips, come back, do some training in the lake, go on trips, come back, do training in the lake. And then I moved out to North Carolina. It was a little bit of a last minute decision. I had a close friend of mine pass away, and he was pretty far from his family, and it was kind of a sudden thing. He was only 35. And that kind of reminded me that I should be closer to my family. So they live out here in North Carolina. So I decided to pick up and move. And when I got out here, the first thing I did is called a dive shop and, said, hey, I got to find where the diving's at in the area here. Found a really cool course director that talked to me for like an hour and a half, like over the phone, like out of nowhere. I just called the shop, and he literally took an hour and a half of his time to tell me all about the diving in North Carolina. So again, just like shout out to dive shops that are making you feel welcomed. Got in, took my rescue class with them, wound up going into DM training. And then maybe about 6 months later, I decided to go ahead and sign up for the IDC, the instructor development course, and got my instructor there. So I guess the long roundabout question you had originally was like, did I always want to be an instructor? So yeah, I did. And then I almost wanted to quit completely and be completely done with scuba, and then somehow turn that around to like, now I am a huge advocate of going on trips, huge advocate of training and like practicing outside of your training courses, and taking time to actually like go and have some fun diving and get more time in the water. And it's just kind of moved on from there. So I've been an instructor since late last year, and been teaching a lot of open water classes and different specialties and advanced courses and all that fun stuff since.
Oh, that's awesome, man. A couple of things that you were saying in there. It's so hard with scuba gear sometimes, because it's like, you can try the wets. I mean, a wetsuit you can, kind of usually tell. But with a lot of scuba gear, it's like you need to get out in the water and try it. And most of the time, it's like you can't. It's like you have to buy first, then you can try. And that's awesome that the shop worked with you to get it, sent back and hemmed up, because there is nothing more frustrating than just having a piece of gear work against you, and then you're trying to figure it out, especially as a newer diver. And definitely it's in some of those classes, some of those experiences that I've had where I'm going through a class and I just get really, really frustrated from this or that. Sometimes those end up being like the best classes, because once you overcome that, it's like I can overcome anything now, and you just keep moving forward. And no, that's awesome. But I do definitely know the feeling of going into cold water. It just really really throws you back sometimes. And I've spoken to some people on the podcast, and I'm like, oh, it's, they're ice diving in Europe, doing some crazy stuff. I'm like, I don't know how I could handle if I could handle something like that, because I'm like, I've dove some pretty cold water, but nothing compared to what you're doing. So that's awesome though that you were able to overcome those challenges and then still progress. And that's one thing I always would tell my students is, don't get class hungry. Just, take a class, get some fun dives in, know why you got into it. And if everybody takes that path where you're like, okay, let me take a class, let me get some fun dives in, take another class and realize it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But no, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I'm obviously glad that you didn't quit. I didn't know that whole story. So that's awesome that you were able to like power through and then make it out to North Carolina, you said?
Yeah, I'm in the Raleigh, North Carolina area now. So, yeah, and I think I met you actually shortly after that advanced open water fiasco because I
Oh,
think that's where I was being encouraged to take, like, just go out and fun dive a little bit more in general. And I think I remember speaking to you, and you were behind the counter at Dive World up front there. And you're like, hey man, I'm Nick. How's it going? Like, oh yeah, if you want to dive sometime, man, let me know. And that's where it was like, it started hitting me like the dive community is super open. Like either all these people are super weird and just like super cool with like, hey man, yeah, I don't even know you, but come dive with me. Or like the community is just really friendly. And I found out it's the latter. The community
yeah,
for the most
yeah.
part is extremely friendly and maybe a little weird too sometimes, but extremely, extremely friendly. And, like I said, you can just run out and go to any dive site in the area. Basically, you'll find divers there. Especially on weekends, and you can join a group, and there's going to be someone there that'll say, "Hey, yeah, of course you can come join us." And and if you're going to do that, maybe advice for any newer divers out there: let them know that you're a newer diver. It's really,
Yeah.
really nice if you do that. I did later do some fun dives with a few friends of mine, and like had a beginner diver, didn't tell us he was a beginner diver. Didn't have weights in his weight pockets type thing, and like we did like somewhat of a pre-dive safety check, but we didn't do a good enough one, obviously, and like he was struggling to get down the whole time and everything. And we're like, man, if you told us you just finished open water last week, like we would have taken way more time with you. We didn't know. Like we would have been like, hey, let's just sit at the surface and make sure you can get down, make sure you got this and that. Like we thought you were solid. Sorry. So, that was us for being bad buddies, I guess. But, definitely, I think if you let them know, so many people are really, really open to taking on newer people and trying to grow the community, grow the sport and everything like that. So.
Oh no, for sure, and that's one thing I always like to tell people is communication is key because I'm not gonna know what type of diver you are. You can tell me, or sometimes that's why like I'll do like a little bit of a not I don't want to say interview, but I'm like, oh, how long you been diving, this and that. But yeah, if you're not open and honest about your skill level, then people are gonna find out really quickly. like oh
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Well, and from the instructor perspective, we have things like, Patty has like the Reactivate, but just any of those like refresher type courses. And, and part of the thing you're supposed to do as an instructor is like interview them. So I'm like, oh, when was your last dive? Like, tell me about some of the dives you've done. And you'll hear people all the time like, oh, I'm pretty experienced. It's been a year or two since I dove, so I wanted to get touched up on everything and just kind of, fine tune stuff. But I'm pretty experienced. I went on a trip and did like 3 dives. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, wow. And you find out it's like the warm tropical water, 100-foot visibility, like no current at all. And it's like, okay, hey, and not knocking that, like that is more experience than other people sometimes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, that's definitely different than like, even if you told me, you were down in Mexico, like drift diving or something, like at least I'd have a little bit maybe more confidence in that experience of it type thing, or depend on what you're doing. So it's always fun to do those, like you said, kind of an interview type thing of hey, like tell me about your diving a little bit and what have you been up to, and this and that, and underestimate or overestimate their experience levels. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, definitely. And the times that I try to do it the most is when you're on the dive boat with like kind of the new buddy that you just met. It's like oh like kind of checking out their gear, just being like oh okay like what's how long you been diving, where you been. Well, speaking of the diving, tell me a little bit about your local diving over there in North Carolina.
Yeah. So the local place to dive, we pretty much everyone goes to a place called Fantasy Lake Adventure Park. So it was a rock quarry, and in the 50s they hit a spring basically as they were drilling down, doing some pilot test holes. I think it was like 80 feet down, and they hit that spring, and it started flooding the quarry like real quick. They had to shut it down, pull out all their equipment, and some stuff that is a little bit too big to move got stuck down there. So there's still
Oh,
like
wow.
a rock crusher down there, for example, that's like bolted to the bottom. And there's some different like conveyor belt stands and things where they were like hauling granite out and stuff like that too. So
Oh, that's kind of cool.
there's some cool stuff there. They don't allow any fishing at all, so the fish get pretty large there, which is cool. They have a pretty good habitat there for them. And then all the like surrounding area, the terrain is all kind of contoured away from the dive site itself. So all the rain runoff pretty much goes away from the water. So that means that we actually get decent visibility as well. So rather than having all that sediment fall into the lake, it runs away from it. So this last 2 days I was out there actually helping teach a class, and I mean we had 20-foot visibility for most of the period. And of course freshwater diving we get a thermocline, so the first 20 feet or so is pretty good, and then it drops like 5 degrees or so. And then, you go down a little bit further and it drops to like freezing cold temperatures. I've been in that 80-foot hole once, and that 80-foot hole drops to around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I think.
Oh.
In like summertime, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is in Celsius, I think about 10 Celsius, something like that. So
Are you still rocking the 5 mil?
yeah. So I've since upped my exposure protection to different things now. So I have a Hollis dry suit that I love, and I dive that in the wintertime. I'm diving cold water now. So I do that, and then different levels of undergarments and things like that for my cold water in the quarry, because we do teach open water in the quarry in December and January and stuff, and people are crazy and go out there. We have our students go out with 7 mils with hoods and gloves and 5 mil or 7 mil boots. More power to them, but I think that's a terrible way to get introduced to diving. But that's how they do it. I go in my dry suit and a hood, and then I love Bear Exowear. It's like shark skin or any of those like really thinsulate type things where there's basically no buoyancy added, and it acts like about a 3 mil, maybe a 2 to 3 mil. Usually they're fleece lined and stuff too, so I wear that all the time. I have 2 sets of Bear Exowear. And then I have that 5 mil still, that same one that got hemmed up for me and everything. It's in good condition still. And I think I'm going to buy a semi-dry this year as well to kind of cover some of that transition period for me. But, like anything else, you keep expanding and buying more and more gear all the time. And it's just, I don't have a 3 mil yet, so maybe I'll buy a 3 mil at some point. But the ExoWear kind of works as a 3 mil, so I don't know.
Is that what you're wearing, like the EXO wear when you're going on like Caribbean trips, or you just like board shorts and dive skin?
I'm really warm usually. Like I got bioprene, so I don't always need the exposure protection for any type of thermal protection, I guess. But I do like to have like a skin on of some sort. So I was always diving, board shorts and a rash guard, and like I'm good with that. I actually did the cenotes in Tulum in board shorts and a rash guard. And I think those are like 68 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So what is that like? 20 degrees Celsius, I think, is the temps in there. So, but I did 2 or 3 hour long cavern dives in the cenotes and, rash guard and shorts, and I'm fine. I mean, it got a little chilly near the end, but like, I'm good with that. I'm cold tolerant. But
Yeah.
I've since learned that I should wear that ExoWear or some type of like, at least a 1 mil or something, because, as good as I think my buoyancy is, I started getting into underwater photography and video a little bit and stuff. And, you try to get like a certain shot and you're like pressed up against a rock and you're trying to squeeze in for the right framing. And it's nice to have a little exposure protection. I've also recently got rec certified and am starting to explore just a few of the things that are in the local diving spot. I should tell you more about our quarry, I guess, too, because I didn't finish that. But, we have a couple boats and like a bus down there and things like that, too. So, very small penetrations, but it's something to get a little experience. And they're all, of course, rusted out and everything. So I've learned that like exposure protection is really nice in case you bump up against a rusty wall and, you want to make sure you're not cutting yourself up too bad. So
No, for sure. Because I just took a rec. Well, I took a rec course back in May, and even I had these really thin gloves. But as soon as like I was just kind of running into stuff because we were doing some blackout drills, and I mean just rusty metal sitting in salt water will. And then just your hands. My hands were so beat up. But it's a very, very fun course. So real quick, you're getting into photography. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? What kind of setup do you have? What are you doing there?
So I'm nothing crazy right now. I'm using a GoPro on a nice little tray with a couple lights, just little video lights on it. Mostly doing video because photography I feel like is even harder. You have to like really frame up that shot and hold that frame perfect. Where at least with video I can kind of reframe it a little bit in post if need be or something like that. GoPros do a really good job, but they also are very limited. If you're into photography, you have like a fixed aperture on a GoPro, you can't do too much about that. They make some different accessories to add like, lens mods and things like that. Like Backscatter has macro lenses and stuff, and that helps. But at the end of the day, like you're still kind of stuck with what you have for basic settings. So I think I've pretty much gotten the most out of a GoPro I can. I can't see myself investing in a larger rig right now though, because it is just so much extra weight and crap to take with you on a dive.
Yeah.
And I love that my GoPro, I can either like bring a selfie stick or that tray, and it's very compact, it's easy to store away, and it works for me for that. But I've got more into it now because I started a YouTube channel for scuba diving, and and I wanted to like have good footage and stuff, so I've really tried to pushing the limits of my GoPro as much as possible, and like color correct everything so I don't have the blue and green footage that you see on Facebook and Instagram and stuff all the time. And and it takes a long time, but like I'm enjoying it though. It's been good, and I think what I'm learning now is if I am going to keep doing YouTube stuff, I need to do better at like I guess finding like a story in my shots. Like I kind of just take random shots of like whatever I see, like, oh, a sea turtle, let me take a 30-second clip of that. Oh, cool, look at there's a couple French angelfish, let me take a 20-second pan shot of that. But then like you get this footage home and you're like, how am I supposed to make a video out of these random shots? So that's kind of what I'm working on now with that. But it's been fun. There's a lot of great YouTubers that teach underwater photography type stuff. Matthias Lebo is the one that I think of the most. He's Swiss based, I think. Maybe Austrian. I forget now. One of the German countries. I feel bad at saying it that way, but Swiss or Austrian based. And he has an underwater photography course that he sells online, and he has like all these cool color correcting type tutorials and like GoPro setup tutorials and all this type of junk. And he has taught me so much through his videos. So it's been really helpful.
No, that's awesome. And no, I have same thing, a little GoPro, and I've actually, so I had a GoPro a while back, like a few years ago, and I'm horrible at video editing. I'm slowly learning, and I literally had all this footage, and then I would go and get more footage, kind of like you're saying, oh, let me just get this, let me just get that. And I'd come home and it would be on my computer, and I'm like, what am I even doing with this? It's just sitting on my computer. So I went without a GoPro for a while, and then I just picked up a, the DJI Action 3 cam. It's basically like a GoPro.
Yeah.
I just used it for the first time on this last trip that I went on, and I was pumped. I mean, I got the Mola Mola on video, so that was really cool. Some mantas, so I definitely see the benefit of it. And same thing. I want to get into underwater photography, videography, but I'm just like, man, for me, it's you're lugging this big thing around, but then also the cost of to get into underwater photography is no joke. But have you heard of the I think it's the Olympus, like the TG5 or TG6 now maybe?
Yeah. So I've heard of those. Yeah. I mean, and they come with some underwater capability like built in. Like I think they're rated to a decent depth, and then you can buy the housing for it, and I think it's like 100 meters or something like that with the housing. So
those are pretty cool, just because for somebody like me that doesn't want to go full bore into that world, it's nice because I've seen some really nice macro shots on those TG6s. You can get some decent video. I believe you can shoot in RAW. So it's pretty cool that, and it's not overly big. It's not this huge, big, just contraption people are bringing in the water with them. But yeah, it's definitely something I'm enjoying. But then I feel like it's like for every 30 seconds of video that I'll take, it's like there's 40 minutes of editing, 30 minutes of editing that I have to do. I'm like,
it's tough. It really is. For listeners, I have a couple pictures behind me, but I took the shot of the sea lions here in La Paz, Mexico, down in the Sea of Cortez, which is like Baja California. And that was with the GoPro. And then this octopus here, that was also with my GoPro in Curacao.
Oh,
And
that's
then
awesome.
the middle one's a picture of me that someone took of me over a wreck in Curacao. But like I think those shots turned out great, and I blew them up on a canvas and got them printed and hung in my office here and stuff. So like those are great. But you know that's like a couple shots out of hundreds that I took probably that like were a little bit blurry because again like GoPros have that fixed focal length, which basically means there's only so much area that's in focus. So you have to get the right distance from your subject, otherwise it's not going to be in focus properly. Like I have some frogfish video where like the frogfish was like totally walking along the coral and everything, but it is all out of focus because I just wasn't like, at the right distance away. And I'm so mad because he was like opening his mouth all big and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And I got home and I'm like, it's all blurry. This is completely useless. Oh man. So, yeah, I think the Olympus TG6, they seem great as a like good starter to get into it. Like you said, the housing alone for bigger camera rigs can be thousands of dollars and the
Oh,
cameras are
just as
thousands of
much as the
dollars.
camera. Yeah.
Yeah, lenses are thousands of dollars as well. And then you think like, man, what if my housing floods at some point? And then you start getting into other things. If you're taking photography, you're talking about getting strobes and having, really expensive lights for strobes. If you have video lights, you want really powerful video lights. Maybe you'll get like a third video light with the remote switch and stuff like that too. So you can do like some backlighting on your subject and it gets so in depth. And then, the other part that I think is difficult is, if you're on a dive trip or something and like the photographers are usually in the very back of the group because they're trying to get those shots and everything. So like it gets a little bit dangerous sometimes because you start separating from the group if you're not paying attention, and you can get so transfixed on your camera that you're not paying attention to everything else around you, of course, too. And you always see the people, especially newer people with their GoPros and stuff, like they'll swim like right underneath the diver and like almost push them out of the way so they can get the shot of something, and it's like all they're looking at is that camera screen and they have no clue what's going on around them. And then of course like because you're always in the back, your dive buddies like, come on, let's go. And you're like, hold on, let me get like one more shot here. So it can be tough. It can be tough for sure. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of patience and skill, and you got to have buoyancy on point too. And it's a lot.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was the trip I was just on in Indonesia. I was talking to, I think he was the dive operations manager for the resort, and he's a photographer, and he was bummed because he's like, man, I'm missing this one little screw that is like 25 cents, but I can't bring my camera underwater. And the problem is, I think he said it was like Ike Light, and they only, ship within the States. So he's like, now I have to try to find this 25-cent screw and then get it shipped all the way out here. So he's like, this little screw is going to end up costing me a ton of money. But he was just telling me also that there was a guy that he was diving with maybe like a week or two before, and Sony A7R3 forgot to do something, and his whole housing flooded with his camera, and now it's I don't know if that's recoverable, but I mean that's definitely a very expensive mistake. So I'm just like, man.
$3,200 camera. So,
Yeah.
like over $3,000 for the camera. The housing's probably $3,000 to $4,000 by itself. And then you add that he's probably got a few $1,000 lens on there too.
Oh man, that's definitely not a happy camper. Well, just to move forward a little bit. So you were speaking of your YouTube channel, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's Circle H Scuba.
That is correct. Yeah, Circle H Scuba. So my last name's Hughes. So the Circle H is kind of a family tradition where we have some different side hustle companies and stuff that have always been like Circle H something.
Oh, okay.
Going back a few generations actually, which is kind of fun. So I decided to kind of keep that going with this. So Circle H Scuba. Main goal for me is, as a beginner diver, I think you have a lot of questions and it's hard to find answers. And, you can go to the dive shop and they'll chat with you. And usually they're totally happy to chat with you for hours. But that's not always the most convenient thing. And sometimes people don't feel comfortable just asking what they think are like the dumb questions, really. But, I think there's a lot we could do better, again, in the industry. I was talking about marketing earlier, and I think that that's a problem there. And like, there's kind of a high barrier of entry to things. And even you mentioned like gear, for example. You can't really try it before you buy it. You pretty much have to buy it, hope that it works out. And most dive shops say if you get it wet, you can't return it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's because the dive shops can't return it to vendors when it's been wet, it's been used, and they can't resell it as new because it's been used at that point. So, like, it's kind of a catch 22 on all around, really. The dive shops get screwed if they do take returns outside of that. The vendors aren't really going to take back product that's been used either, so there's not really a good process for it. So I looked at that and I was looking online, and there's probably 10 or less like active scuba channels that are like very very good at what they do. I think, like, whether it's an educational type thing or just an entertainment type thing, there's probably 10 or less of them out there. A few of them would be like Azul Unlimited. She does great. Sarah does awesome content. It's kind of
Really
travel
good
vlogging,
stuff.
but
Yeah.
also educational stuff. Divers Ready, James down in Florida, he does a really good job of educational type stuff as well. Dive Saga, he's down in Utila, and he's a course director down there, and he does really awesome like travel vlog stuff and some educational stuff. And then there's like D, All My D. He does a lot of the like shock and awe. I found a gun under a bridge scuba diving
Oh
type
yeah.
thing. Man Plus River, that does the same type of thing. Like, I found 20 phones in the river in this popular this popular swim spot, that type of thing. And there's just a couple others. There's really not that many out there, and I think it's because of what we were just talking about with underwater video and photography. It's like, if you think about a YouTube channel, like, you have to be good at video, first of all, but now you add underwater video instead. So it's like that whole extra challenge. You have to be able to edit. You have to be able to make thumbnails, hopefully. I mean, technically you can start with whatever you want, but like, if you want something that people are going to click on, you have to have good thumbnails. So you're a graphic
Yeah.
artist too. You have to know some about like search engine optimization and like marketing things, and like what to title something, how to write the description so it shows up properly in search. You're usually writing a script or an outline of some sort. It might be as like storytelling if it's entertainment based. If it's educational, you have to know what you're talking about enough to be able to teach someone it as well. So there's like all these barriers of entry that come in, and you can just get started with your smartphone, of course. But like, if you want to build something that's like actually adding value to the community, I think that you need to have a little bit of extra skill in there. Otherwise, people just won't really watch it. So, last year I kind of decided, as I got my instructor, like, man, there's so many questions out there. Like, you walk into a dive shop and you want to buy gear as a new diver. You're like, I just got open water certified. Where do I start with buying gear? Oh, well, here's our BCDs. And you look at a rack and there's like 20 BCDs hung up. And you're like, cool. Where do I start with that? Okay, well, maybe, or even before you get certified, right? Like, hey, you need to buy your mask, fin, snorkel. All right, cool. Here's our mask wall, and there's like 40 masks hanging up, and you're like, how the heck do I pick between that? And there's some masks that are like $60, and there's some that are $200, and you're like, how do I even know? Is the $200 one the best? Is the $60 one terrible? Like, how do I know? And fins, same thing. Like, a wall of fins, and it's like $100 all the way up to a few $100s, and you're like, what do I do here? I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm brand new, and like I said with my wetsuit, I've never worn a wetsuit before. I have no idea what's good or bad. I don't know. 5 millimeters. I'm in the U.S. What's that? Like, just like those types of things. So I guess like part of the goal of the channel is to try to break down those barriers as much as possible. So like, I did one video on like picking a mask, for example, and I was saying, for me at least, I think the most important thing is comfort. So like, go to a shop, get the mask that fits your face and is comfortable more than anything else, because if you get a good seal and it fits your face and it's comfortable, that's what you want. Don't go buy the most expensive thing because it might not fit your face properly, or and don't necessarily buy the cheapest thing. And then like, I did a different one on gear guide type stuff in general, and it was like, you can rent almost everything. So like, don't feel like you're rushed to go do this, because the first question most dive shops ask is, oh, well, what type of diving do you plan to do? And as a new open water student, they have no idea what type of diving they're going to do. They have no idea. The only reference they have is what their instructor wore and what they wore as a rental BCD from the shop. They have no clue if they want a jacket style, if they want to have like the ripcord weight system, if they want to have, D-rings on the shoulders or not, or hip D-rings. They don't know anything about that. They don't know if they want backplated wings. They don't know if they want this or that. So like, all that stuff matters, but a new diver doesn't know. So if they're looking to get into the sport and make that investment, I don't think there's a good process of educating them on like how to pick that stuff out other than trial and error. And there's probably a reason why I have 3 back plates and wings, and I have that jacket style BCD that I bought originally, and I just bought a side mount setup too. And it's like, there's a reason why I have that stuff. Part of it is I don't want to sell anything, but the other part is that like, trial and error. Like, I saw someone recommend this. I dove it one time because I borrowed a friend's or something like that, and then I got some experience with it. But do I know that the Hollis ST Elite that I use is the best backplate and wing? Nope, I have no idea. It's the one that I happen to try. And and dive gear is so expensive that like, I mean, it's an investment that you're making that you can't return. And
Oh
you're just
yeah,
blindly
God.
accepting whatever someone tells you at the shop, you know? So yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I'm going on a bit of a tangent for sure. But like the main reason of the channel was kind of trying to address those types of issues. And like, you know, and then going back to the course hunting type thing too, like how do you practice things or how do you get more information after the course ends? Like you got to go out and dive more, but like what if I forgot how to use a compass? Like do I need to take another class or where do I go to find that info? Like I can go to my e-learning and they kind of tell me, but I can't ask questions really. They only go so in depth. So you know I'm editing a video now, depending on when this podcast airs, it may be up, but it's how to use a compass, and it's just like really basics on like how the bezel works and how to look at the index marks and like what the features are and how to do an out and back and how to make turns. And you know, and it's just a simple overview, so anyone at any time can look that up and get a little bit of a refresher. And you know, it doesn't replace taking a class, it doesn't replace certification or anything like that, but it's a way to get a little bit extra education. And I'm very active in the comments, so people will ask questions in there and I can get back to them. And you know, and similar, I think you do this too, but anytime I teach a class, I tell my students like, I was your instructor now, but I'm going to continue to be your instructor in the sense of like, feel free to ask questions and I'll answer whatever I can. And, you know, I'm open via email and I'll get back to you. And if I don't know the answer, I'll be honest and tell you I don't know. And I'll either find someone that does, or, you know, I'll just say, hey, I don't know, go to the shop and ask someone or something like that. Right. But I'm really big on that. I want to promote the community as much as possible, make it more beginner friendly, and kind of like try to reduce those fears of like what actually happens in an open water class. Like what do I do about this, and answer those questions. Like I wear contacts, can I even dive? You know, I have claustrophobia, can I dive? Or I have physical limitations or inabilities, you know, can I dive? And like what adaptive techniques are out there? And, you know, I don't know, there's so much industry knowledge and jargon out there, like adaptive techniques. That is not something anyone's typing into Google unless you're already a diver, you know, and you're a diver and you've worked with someone with limitations. Otherwise, you have no idea what to type in. And, you know, I feel like I said, the industry needs a marketing course of some sort. So my goal is to do that, I guess. I'm going to DEMA this year, the Dive Expo for Manufacturers Association. I think it's DEMA, Dive Expo Manufacturers Association. Well, we're going to DEMA this year, and like I want to talk to manufacturers and basically call them out for this type of stuff of like, hey, you know, you market to divers, but what about non-divers? How do we get people into the sport? And see what type of partnerships I can work with them on making content to help them like market to non-divers out there. So, you know, that's the main goal. You know, experienced people will find use out of it too. There's good reminders there too. If you've been diving for a while, you know, I did a video on like mistakes beginners make, and some people commented and they're like, yeah, I get complacent and totally skip those things. And I've been diving for 10 years and this is a good reminder. Thank you. So, you know, I think there's stuff like that too.
No, you make a lot of valid points, especially newer divers. It is kind of like where I go, where do I go next? And that was one thing I always tried to tell my students: reach out. Like, you have my contact, you got a question, open door, reach out. I'll try to help you to the best of my ability. So that's amazing that you're putting videos out there to get to a bigger audience, and then you're active in the comments to be able to, you know, for them to actually interact with you, not just watch a video and then be done with it. So that's really, really cool. I do I do understand the just having massive amounts of gear. Before I moved here, I think I had like 4 or 5 just storage bins just full of random pieces of gear because I never wanted to get rid of anything. I mean, I literally had fins that I wore once, and then they got put into the storage bin, and I was just like, maybe I'll use this one day. And it's like, no, I probably won't. And I actually had to kind of give up some stuff before I moved to Malaysia.
Well, I remember you saying, I think you said on a podcast episode, you were like, when I moved out here, I made sure that I packed all my dive gear first. Okay, what space do I have for clothing and like personal items? So,
It's
you know,
true.
yeah.
Oh, man. And then now it's just, you know, I've been here a year now, and like this room is just slowly getting packed with more dive gear. But yeah, it's just a never ending it's a never ending hobby of just buying gear and this and that. So I'm just curious, so you're getting into side mount Which BC did you buy?
I just got the Apex. What's the W? Is it the WTX? I forget what it's called now. It's funny. The reason I don't know the name, yeah, WSX. There we go. WSX 25. Yeah. The reason I don't know the name fully is my shop has this really awesome program actually with Aqualung Apex, and basically like I was able to get the set at a pretty good price, I'll just say. So I kind of decided to go that route instead. I was looking at Hollis for their katana because I've been a Hollis fanboy for a little bit now. I really enjoy their gear. But, hey, like I said, I don't know any different at the same time. So there could be others that are way better. I've heard good things about Dive Right and, other systems out there. But yeah, I got this set up. Really wanted to try side mount because I'm getting into the photography and videography. Obviously more bottom time. And then, everyone talks about like your buoyancy changes some, but it winds up being so much easier to stay in that nice neutral position. With the tanks along your side. And I'm actually going to be looking into to Patty's tech courses here in a few months. So
Cool.
I said, I'm going to do them in side mount, I think. And I just kind of want to do 40, tech 40 and see how I like it. Not so much to do tech diving, but more so to understand decompression theory at a higher level and, just kind of get more into it. I feel like that's one of those things that I'd like to know more about. I don't necessarily want to do deco dives, but I think if I ever went into deco, like having a better understanding of what to do in those situations would be good. I think Patty's advice for recreational divers is follow your computer. And that's all they tell you ever in recreational courses. And I think that, like, again, that's one of those things that's like, yeah, I should always follow the computer, just like I should never run out of gas. But you teach us how to CISA and you teach us how to share with a buddy. But they don't teach you what to do when you run, when you run out of NDL. They just say follow your computer, which is a little interesting. So for me, I'm always seeking more knowledge. I definitely want to take more classes and stuff all the time. Just, so I can still be a student and get that experience as well. So Tech 40 is kind of my next stop and just kind of getting those decompression models down. And I also love the way the book's written. I don't know if you've ever taken the tech classes from Patty Tech Rec, but the books are written in a way that's like, tech diving will kill you. Are you sure you want to do this? And by the way, if this goes wrong, you're going to die. Are you sure you want to do this? And it's like very, very direct, which is so interesting because Patty is so big and the recreational course is on like, everyone can dive. And for tech rec, it's very much like you really need to think about this before you do it. And I appreciate how much like safety emphasis is on there and how serious the course is with that. So it's been interesting. Yeah. So side mount is kind of what I'm just getting started with right now, getting my feet wet, so to speak, and getting used to the system a bit. And then I'll do Tech 40 in a few months here and see how that goes.
I have not taken a Tech 40 or a technical class from Patty. I do have the manuals though, so I have read them. So I think it's like literally in the first paragraph, like, you will die. So
I think because tech diving, if anyone's interested in it, like it is a very serious thing. You're not just talking about like overhead environments, but you're talking about decompression stops and things where, you have to worry about oxygen toxicity now. You have to worry about your nitrogen load still, of course, too, but also the oxygen load and way more advanced gas planning. So for me, again, my goal wasn't so much to even do these tech dives and go super deep or, stay down for way long and have, an hour or two of hang time afterwards for deco stops. It's more of like, I want to understand more about that decompression theory and, and more about like, no one teaches you about OTUs or anything like that, or like, you don't really calculate your sac rate and Patty recreational or anything like that either. So I just think it's going to be good knowledge. So if anyone's interested in tech, but maybe not wanting to do that, I think there is value in that, basically, of like even the Tech 40 course of just understanding those bits of it.
What I was going to say is, to be honest, it's one of those things because you definitely seem like you're pretty hungry for knowledge. It's you take that one course and then you're like, oh, what's the next course after? So you'll go into the next course, because I recently just, earlier this year, I did I went with the TDI route, and I did advanced nitrox decompression procedures. So we did, I believe it was 40 or 45 meters with 10 minutes of decompression. And it's like instantly, like I was like, man, this is, a lot of fun. You're in the open ocean. It's definitely a little bit more skills coming your way. So it's kind of, you're on a higher level, mental plane, just trying to like get everything right. And it's definitely I was definitely hooked, and now I'm just like, now I've been kind of eyeing the rebreathers, which I'm like, I definitely can't afford that, but that's the route I want to go.
Yeah. I want to do rebreathers. I want to do it sometime. Again, because of photography, first of all. Like photography and video, fish will come right up to you because they don't have the bubbles there. So they're not like getting scared off as much. The other part of it though is like you said, the cost barrier. And then again, this exasperates the issue of gear where I can't try it before I buy it. Like there are some try rebreather type days that some vendors will do. So I guess like I think Kiss does that, for example, every once in a while. So if you can find a vendor day to try rebreathers, and it's like almost like Discover Scuba Diving, but I think it's like Discover Rebreather Diving that they do something like that. So like that might be a way to do it. But I mean, there's all these different rebreather rigs out there too, and like how do you know which one to invest in when it's so much money? And then the other problem for me is I don't know anyone with a rebreather. So like what am I going to do with it? Like unless I solo dive, which I don't really want to do, especially on a rebreather setup. I mean, in one sense, like that's probably one of the safest ways to do it because I'm on a rebreather with back gas. But on the other hand, people talk about how rebreathers, one small thing can go wrong, and if you don't catch it, you're done for. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's like I know they've gotten better over time, but I need someone else to invest in a rebreather with me, and preferably the exact same one I have. So then when we're going through that giant pre-dive checklist, like we can both check each other's gear because we know each other's checklists really well. And I just don't have that. So until I find someone that's ready to like go in with me on it, I don't think I'm going to pick one up. There's also issues with like charters and stuff like that. Like they don't want rebreather divers sometimes because you have so much bottom time. They have to leave you if there was an emergency. Recreational divers will come up, and let's say one of them, gets a DCS hit or something like that. They're going to put them on O2 and they're going to take the boat back. So you're going to go back from your rebreather dive after 2 hours of bottom time or something, and you're going to have no boat. So they don't want to have that usually on charters with mixing with recreational divers. So you have to find a tech charter, and that's also sometimes difficult to do.
One last question before we close it out, coming up on that hour mark. What advice would you give to newer divers? So this is you now, and you're looking at Thomas, who just completed his open water, or maybe even before you went into your open water. What is the one piece of advice that you'd like to try to get out there? Say, hey, work on this. Don't do this. What would you say?
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest piece of advice is get more time in the water. Absolutely do it, and don't wait too long after your class. My girlfriend actually just got certified, and she hated all the skills. She hated the mask skills, especially like most divers do. Hates water on her face, hates water up her nose, all of that type of stuff. And what I told her is, your open water dives, like we're teaching you all the things to do when something goes wrong diving. And in theory, like none of that stuff should go wrong. Like in a day-to-day dive, you're not going to have a mask get kicked off your face. Your mask strap shouldn't be breaking. You shouldn't run out of air ever. You aren't going to be worrying about like little leaks to clear your mask out. Sure, like that's one thing that's happening every dive pretty much. But your regulator shouldn't be getting kicked out of your mouth constantly or yanked out or anything like that. So like all those skills, they kind of suck. They aren't fun. That's not the funnest thing to do, sitting neutrally buoyant or, on your knees on a platform, depending on how you're taught. Like sitting there, not doing anything and just sitting in one spot, that's not scuba diving. And, dive 4 for the PADI system is like, let's go and plan a dive and we'll do a 20-ish minute dive. And like that is the most fun. And when she did that, that's when she started saying like, okay, I see why you love this now. Like we got to see these, cool little fish and stuff. We went around a little plane. We went down and saw the little rusted out bus and stuff. Like that's kind of cool. And she's like, I can't wait to get in the ocean and see a sea turtle. And I think beginner divers, like they need to dive. Like that one dive, again, a little bit of injustice with the system maybe is like we do so much skill practice that a lot of times shops don't give instructors time to take the divers on dives.
Yeah.
And like every dive in open water can be a dive. Like you do skills and then you go on a dive, but usually if you've hit for PADI, it's like a 20-minute minimum or a certain air pressure or something like that. Then you finish the skills, it's 20 minutes, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to go up now, and we'll do a surface interval, and we'll come back for dive 2. And it's like, if the industry afforded more time, I think that would be better for divers. So beginner divers, if you just got certified, get out there with someone from class if you can, or someone that got you into diving, or talk to the shop and find a group, Facebook group or something to go out there and do some more dives and just get time just swimming around, get comfortable kicking around. Like go on a few dives, don't even necessarily practice any skills. Just like go out, swim. You're going to be having your hands full with your buoyancy, and you're going to find so much out just by having a little bit of extra experience. And if it's a lake or a quarry or anything like that, just go do it and have some fun. and enjoy yourself before you jump right back to class. You don't need instructor supervision 24/7. You feel like you don't know what you're doing yet type thing, but a class isn't necessarily going to teach you what to do. They teach you the things to know, like when things go wrong, or they teach you the base skill that you can practice on your own later. And you need to do that practice. So more time in the water. I guess that's the main summary. Get more time in the water.
Thomas, thank you very, very much for coming on to the podcast today, man. I really, really appreciate it. And I definitely look forward to catching more of your videos. And I can't wait to meet up again and have another chat, man. It's been fun, especially to catch up, dude. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great seeing you too, Nick. And thanks for having me.
Off Gassing, a scuba podcast.